Hello. Here we are. It's a pleasure to be here, and also a salute to all of those who are watching online. I'm calling on all the way from London and the previous session, Nadine Pinto. If you can join us, please. And all the way from the USA, Scott Hume. Nadine has been introduced, and I'm going to introduce her as such now because I really want to talk business in a minute. 40 companies, a group of 40 companies. These people are sending people in all directions, all over the globe, right? Yeah. And yet you have a foundation, and that's very interesting. I'll come back to you in a minute, Nadine. And Scott. Scott is in the business of rescuing those who are going in all directions. And we're glad that you're here. They send people, and sometimes you have to rescue them. Sending people out in all directions. You're talking about 40 corporations. We know what companies are like. Companies usually are thinking sales. They're thinking income. They're thinking profit. Companies, that's the raison d'etre of companies. It seems to me that there is something a bit more strategic about thinking about sustainability, about having a foundation that's doing at least 60 projects on the ground in several continents. Can you tell us about the psyche of that strategic element? How does it work for business? Why is it good for a business to think that way?
Sure, absolutely. So obviously travel, we want to be mutually beneficial for the communities that we're traveling in as well as our travelers. And we started in 2008 with the formation of the TreadRight Foundation, and that was very close to our chairman's heart. I might have mentioned that it's a family-owned company, and so they're already very closely tied to wildlife, obviously coming from South Africa. So that's kind of where it came from, is we need to start thinking about giving back to the communities that we're actually operating in. And for 2008, that was very revolutionary for the travel industry. I'd say CSR, corporate sustainability, corporate social responsibility was a little bit further ahead in other industries. And for 2008, that was great, a great step for the Travel Corporation. And then we introduced our first sustainability strategy a few years later in 2013. And that really focused on how do we remove single-use plastics from our operations. The travel industry tends to look at sustainability on an issues basis. So it was single-use plastics, and it was animal welfare. And then in 2019, when I joined the company, we started to look at carbon and climate change. And what would it really mean for a travel company at our scale to look at climate change and the risk it poses, and what we could be doing to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So it was definitely a foresight, and it's very strategic because climate change is affecting our business. We do have river cruises that operate across Europe, and they could barely operate this summer, right? We had river levels that were like 5 centimeters and so on. So it's a really real risk to the business, and so it's something we decided to take on. In 2020, of course, we had the pandemic, but we still continued to launch our sustainability strategy when we didn't have any travelers on the ground, which I think was remarkable for the Travel Corporation. And it's something we continue to hold close to our heart. We're tackling issues such as over-tourism, climate change, diversity and inclusion, animal welfare. We continue with single-use plastics. So it's very strategic in the way that we are approaching sustainability at the Travel Corporation. We have measurable goals that we report on. We have impact reports to make sure that we can hold ourselves accountable. And it's all in line with where we see the company going in the future.
So you're sending people in all directions. Is there any one place you don't ever send people to?
I would say, probably the areas that are close to tourism. North Korea, that sort of thing. But otherwise, we operate in 70 destinations, so I guess it's not a whole lot of countries on the
How many people do you send to Antarctica?
Not very many, like 10 maybe on a year.
Scott, have you saved anyone out of Antarctica?
Not for my brands, he hasn't.
No, we have not saved any of her travelers in Antarctica. But yes, we have addressed travel crises in Antarctica.
Have you ever thought, what the hell was he thinking? Or what the hell was she thinking going to that specific place, doing that thing that is called travel?
So for the audience, so you introduced me, but I'd like to introduce my company. Just briefly, it's called Global Rescue.
Ahead, Scott. That was coming anyway, but go ahead.
But our business is travel risk and crisis management. So those are the services we provide. So to answer your question directly, do I think, what were they thinking? I think about that every day. Somebody challenges my thinking every day, and we're in the business of making travel happen. So we want people to go to where they want to go. They want to go to Nimes. They want to go to Mount Everest. We want to make that happen, but in a safe way. Everybody has a great experience, and but yes, people they surprise me every day.
Head of operations at Global Rescue, and Global Rescue has paramedics, physicians, even military personnel, veterans who are able to go and save somebody or rescue somebody from a dangerous place, such as maybe climbing the Himalayas.
Yes, we've done over 150 evacuations this year from Mount Everest and the surrounding peaks.
How many destinations do you send people to that could be high risk and are assessed as such in terms of, let's say, adventure travel?
We don't do very much, actually. We only really have 1 or 2 adventure travel brands that will kind of go to really remote areas, such as the Himalayas or Antarctica, some places in Asia. But we have done risk assessments. For most of our trips, we have to do a risk assessment, on every trip to make sure that everything's okay. We do have a lot of older travelers with us as well. So just basic risk assessments happen on an annual basis for our trips.
Scott, risk assessment. Now, you would think that that is very logical. A travel agency is doing adventure travel, and they have all of these destinations that are a lot of fun and extremely adventurous, and probably if you achieve them, you're a hero kind of thing. Are they doing enough risk assessment for these places?
So risk comes I think you can define it across a spectrum, and then there's different constituents on any risk model. So Nadine's company does risk assessments, but the traveler also is embracing some risk. So has the traveler done a risk assessment, and are they coordinated together? And then is there a second set of eyes that looks at some of this, which we think we fill a little bit of that void. We can assist companies that maybe don't have the staff. Sometimes risk assessments can be very resource intensive, time intensive, and some companies just don't have that level of staff to dedicate to full products or products like they'd like to have. And we add a second set of eyes, or we assist travelers who say, hey, I want to travel with Nadine, and this is what they tell us about the risk of this trip. What's your opinion of it? Or what's your opinion of it based on my personal medical needs? And so when we add an extra layer of expertise to this topic, we think that we're reducing risk for the company, for the traveler.
Now, when we talk risk assessment, most people think that this is something that governments need to do, for example. This is the job of a government or a job of the public sector. It seems to me from what you're saying, both of you, that that definitely is an issue that the government should worry about, the industry should worry about, but also what you're saying is that the individuals, the consumers themselves, need to worry about.
Right. So I don't want anybody to get the impression that we think there's a risk behind every tree, but if somebody's going to a destination they've never been to before, maybe it's good to ask somebody who's been there, hey, this is my personal situation. I'm going on a safari, a photo safari, but I have this certain medical condition. If I have an episode, how long does it take to get me out? What are the resources? What does that look like? And then we can help them better plan, help the travel agency better plan, or the travel provider, the event provider.
What about the idea of doing an audit on a location? So I'm only talking about locations that are obviously high risk, not the typical thing. Even safaris are no longer high risk. Most safaris, you're just expected to sit in a truck and see beautiful animals in their own environment, and it's pretty safe. But if you're going beyond this, if you're going beyond that, should there be a certain standard that we should look at? Let's say, just like there are red zones and orange zones and green zones, etc. Should there be a standard that is established in the industry for the risky places?
I don't want to say that there should be a particular standard, but there should be a standard that it should be done. And not every location needs a full audit. And I think we can narrow this down to even use fewer resources. Like you said, safaris are not new anymore, right? There's a lot of them going on. I think the industry has made it about as safe as you can make it, the safari part. But where we can assist, companies like mine can assist, is maybe we don't audit the safari, but we audit the medical infrastructure that supports the safari. So the first level of hospitals or clinics that would support a patient, for instance, or the next level of hospitals at a big city, or audit the aviation assets that support evacuation out of the field. As a piece of, the safari might be safe, but it's the logistics getting somebody back that maybe nobody's looked at yet, and we can provide audits for that.
One thing I noticed about your projects, Nadine, is that you are communicating with the public. You even have a video series that is done, The Storytellers, that tells the story of real people, real situations, real places, real cultures, etc., and also from the point of view of sustainability. So you're putting effort in communicating to the public. So it's not all B2B and public sector versus private sector. Why are you doing that, and how effective is that?
That's right. So the TreadRight Foundation is really kind of viewed as a sustainable tourism kind of foundation. So while we have these sustainable tourism projects on the ground, we also want to be able to educate our travelers on what they can be doing before they leave for their destination, what they can be doing on trip and when they come home to be more sustainable in their life. So we've had kind of what we developed and we call a Make Travel Matter checklist. And it's just a simple checklist that any traveler can use, and we give it to all our travelers before they come on any of our trips. So it reaches a good amount of people, and it just gives them simple tips like pack your reusable water bottle, or bring your reusable bag, or do some research on the culture that you're going to be visiting, so that you're not wearing inappropriate clothes, or know what may be an inappropriate thing to say. So we find it very important to educate the traveler, because we want the traveler in the destination to be acting as if it's their home, because it's someone else's home. So the TreadRight Foundation has really taken a lead on making that communication to our travelers. It is very well received, I would say. A lot of people, they don't necessarily book with us because they see us as sustainable, that they see us as responsible, but then when they're on trip, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense that you're doing this, and oh, it's so great that you don't give us plastic water bottles. So it's not a selling feature at the moment for us to be sustainable, and I don't think travelers are looking for it just yet, but it is going to be something that is defining going forward. And then when they come on, when they come on the trip, it's a reason again for them to book with us again, because they like what we're doing and they like to support that aspect.
Okay, Scott, obviously you're B2C. Anybody can hire Global Rescue to protect them on a certain trip or at a certain destination, right? But you also do B2B. Can you tell us a little bit about that? The angle where you're trying to create a safety zone at the national level rather than at the personal level.
Sure. So, and thanks for that question. Much of our business is B2C, is right to the consumer, but we are frequently asked to provide the services that we've discussed already, but to an enterprise on behalf of all of their travelers. So we are integrated into their risk reduction program so that their travelers, who may not be doing fun things, like going on safaris or going on cruises, but they're actually going to work, but they work overseas or they work away from home, And so we're part of the risk reduction strategy, for enterprises on behalf of their travelers.
And what do you think of that? Is it when you... I know something about crisis management, and what I know is that if you're going to seek help after the crisis erupts, it's going to be much more expensive. And it may take a very long time. But if you have a crisis management system established, then chances are that crisis is not going to grow. Does that apply?
That definitely applies. So what I would, as an example, as you mentioned, if you're going to wait till the event happens, resources are going to be already spoken for, costs are going to be high, time is already against you. But if you have planned for this in advance, maybe you can avoid it in the first place, or you have people in the chain of command who are willing to make decisions quickly on your behalf. Resources are already planned for evacuation or extraction, and you've not only reduced your risk, but you've reduced the footprint and the resources you need to on behalf of your people, on behalf of your travelers.
Better safe than sorry. How many, you as a corporation, you're talking about hotels and ships and all kind of travel programs. What kind of risk management do you do in your own company?
Yeah, so we do. I mean, we ask those questions to all our suppliers where the high risk activities, whitewater rafting in Asia or something like that. Do we have to bring in the cavalry when something goes wrong, or do you have a local emergency plan in place? It's always best that we always select local suppliers as opposed to like foreign suppliers if possible, because we know that they have the capacity in country to actually support with some of those emergencies should they happen. But yeah, overall, it's just, I mean, we do regular risk assessment across hotels, ships, and our trips just to make sure that we know what's going to happen. And then we also make sure that all our suppliers have the appropriate risk assessments completed and insurance possible if anything were to go wrong.
Well, I would love to end this with a story about a rescue, Scott. I'm very sorry. I know
cool
you didn't like to do,
stories.
but everybody here wants to hear about somebody who was saved out of the Himalayas or Antarctica or somewhere.
Brought back to life.
So can you just give us something like that so that we can enjoy the round table after this session?
Let me think. The best one ever. Well, I'll start with a few humorous anecdotes, and these aren't great rescues, but they are real-world scenarios. About once a year, does anybody know how giraffes defend themselves? They hit you with their head. So they take that long neck, and they swing their head around, and they hit their opponent. And so we have, probably once a year, we have somebody get knocked out by a giraffe in Africa. That they're on safari, and believe it or not, it is. And so this is a little risk assessment here. So anybody who's about to do the following activity, in Africa, in places where you go see giraffes, sometimes they have lodges, hotels, but you stay on the second story, so the giraffe can stick their head in, and everybody feels like that's a really safe thing, but you get too close to the giraffe, and that net can go in a long way. So I'm just, I'm warning you now. If you get knocked out by a giraffe, you'll probably see somebody like me in the near future. The most harrowing rescues that we do each year, and I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but
Yeah, I want something
this is adventure travel. So this is more serious than that humorous anecdote. But and I think it always impresses me that it leads into sustainability, risk. I mean, all the topics we've talked about today and numerous of these conferences is adventure travel, mountain climbing. So Mount Everest, the high peaks in Nepal, the high peaks in Pakistan. These are very dangerous places. Now, you have to be permitted to climb there to begin with. So there's some level of assessment for climbers to go there. You have to have a trekking company with you. They're experts. They have local expertise. You add all that together, and it's still dangerous, and And I'm not a doctor, so as Ramzi indicated, my previous career, believe it or not, I started, as an aside, I started off life as an engineer, but I went into the U.S. military, and I spent a career there, and so done some of these things, which is how I found my way to global rescue. But no matter how many times you've climbed a mountain like Mount Everest, you don't know how your body's going to react to that altitude the next time. So you may never have a problem with it, but you may climb it. You know, you had no problem last season, and this season you have a problem. You go right to the base camp, and you have an altitude injury, and you need immediate evacuation. And immediate evacuation in Nepal, believe it or not, the infrastructure is actually pretty good for that. If the weather permits, we can get you down just like that. Have a helicopter on standby, go right to the base camp, and 2 or 3 hours after onset of symptoms, we can have you back down to a lower altitude. But if the weather comes in, it could be days potentially before a helicopter can get up to that altitude. So for when we get a call like that, which is during the climbing season, which is about the last 2 weeks of May every year, just 24 hours a day, we're really on standby and really anxious about the nature of the injuries we get there. Pakistan would be another country where, if you want to talk about very complex rescues, the high peaks in Pakistan are at the most austere part of the nation, up north in the Kashmir region. Very, very difficult to operate, and the distances, believe it or not, from the high peaks to assets that can support you are much, much greater than in Nepal. So it adds a level of aviation complexity, the weather complexity there. So those are the ones that keep me awake at night for during climbing season.
Well, just remember, if you're going there, you know who to call. And thank you so much, Scott, and thank you so much, Nadine. And I hand over to you, Rajan.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramzi.